Hey there, friends. Welcome to another episode of Brown Bags and Bibles. I'm Scott Wakefield, lead pastor at First Christian Church of Greene County, joined as always by...
I'm Mark Liebert, one of the elders here at First Christian Church, serving with Scott.
And we are here to break down life's biggest befuddlements with biblical basics. We have just finished 8 episodes on what do Christians believe,
Right.
in its most mere form. We did C.S. Lewis, Mere Christianity. And now we're going to be doing everybody else.
What do non-Christians believe?
Let's do non-Christians.
Right.
And what do they believe? This will be really interesting as we do world religions and then a few other things after that.
Right.
And we're going to try to do one per episode.
Right. So it's a helpful resource.
Theoretically within 30-ish minutes, but
I mean,
perhaps as many as 75.
I mean, it may go longer, but the point is we do want to keep it to one episode so it can be a great resource for someone to say, like today, what do Hindus actually believe?
Exactly. Hindus, that's where we are first. And by 75, I really meant 45. We're not going to go beyond 45.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we are using a particular format so that from week to week, you'll see a lot of similarities. We hope that will help those who are following along.
Can people see this? Do I have it in the camera?
I don't know.
Okay, so
If
this
our
is
camera guy can make it seen.
Christianity and World Religions, an introduction to the world's major faiths by Derek Cooper, who's a seminary professor. He wrote this about 10 years ago.
Okay.
I have some from college that are older. This one just seems a little more up to date.
Yeah.
And it's great. This is all the world's major faiths, and it's laid out in a way that I recommend you get this book. It has questions at the end. And we're going to follow the structure of this book, and also much of the content will come directly from Dr. Cooper. So I just want to give credit where credit's due and encourage you to buy this. It didn't cost me much, and now it's a great resource on my library shelf.
Yeah.
Scott, you have others that you've used through the years, right?
Yeah, I've got quite a few older ones that I've had for a long time, but I've got 5 or 6 up right here that are newer ones. Yeah.
So just again, Christianity and World Religions, Derek Cooper. We will be using his material. Highly encourage you to get a copy.
So, Hinduism.
Yeah.
There are lots of Hindus.
There are.
1 billion in the world, apparently.
Yeah. Most of them in India.
And 5%?
Yeah,
or something crazy.
95%.
Yeah, are in India alone.
Right.
That is, I knew there were a lot in India.
That's a lot.
There's
like 1.3 billion people in India. So there's like almost 1 billion Hindus in India alone.
Yes. Yeah. 94% of all Hindus and 15% of the population is in India.
Right.
So this is not a small thing.
Right. And I interact with many Indians and Hindus every day because of my job with outsourcing. It's very common. So, while it's mainly in the Indian subcontinent, Nepal, some Bangladesh, some thinking why we care. Well, we care for a couple of reasons. You may interact with far more Indians than you think. They're in IT.
Yes, in the medical field.
Right. A lot of medical field.
Very close to us.
Yeah.
In fact, yes.
This is helpful for me at my work, so it's good to resource this. I wasn't, and I'm not an expert, but his Dr. Cooper's book was very helpful.
Yeah. So the first category he calls beginning.
Yeah.
By which we mean what's their sort of creation account of the world?
Yes.
And reality.
Yeah, he starts every chapter that way. And Hinduism, like some religions, doesn't have one creation account.
Right. It has almost as many as you want to conceive.
Thousands of them.
Yes.
Yeah. And he says they're not seen as contradictory, though if you read them at first glance you think they were, because he says each refracts a tiny light of a much greater reality. And there are countless beginnings, and this is important.
Yes.
It's cyclical.
Yes.
There are beginnings and endings to creation in a constant cycle of rebirth and destruction.
Yes.
Like the world isn't linear for Hindus. It is cyclical.
Well, a lot of people know, isn't that the one about karma and reincarnation?
Sure.
Reincarnation is a part of all that. And I was also thinking as you're talking there, the account of creation being many accounts where each one is just a little part of a larger whole.
Right.
That is one of that's one way to characterize all of what Hinduism thinks in some ways philosophically.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was fascinating to read to understand more of what they believe, but that's one huge difference from the way you make things as a listener. They're not linear, they're cyclical.
Right.
And the universe has been destroyed and rebirthed many times.
Yes. At this point, many folks will say, that's why they have different logics, and it's both and not either or. That is not what we're talking about. Right. Hinduism and all beliefs and faiths are actually beholden to logic. Yeah. And so many folks will talk about Hinduism and some new age ways of thinking as if it's very different than the Western way because it's not either or. And they have many logics. No, they don't. Yeah. But that's a result of talking about this cyclical thing, where you pieces. So a pluralistic way of talking about things. Can't confuse people in this regard. I just want to point that out real quick. I think it's important as we talk about this to understand to have a belief, even if it's Hinduism, is to still do that according to the laws of logic that are across time. Yeah, across history.
You can't say anything.
Absolutely. Right. Yes. Right. Historical origins.
Yeah, the next chapter in his book is Historical Origins. Hinduism is unique here. Literally has no founder, no religious leader, no political structure, no savior, not even a holy place.
Right. Or even a time to do holy place things like worship.
Right. Like some temples do have times you can come. Sure. They don't have prescribed times like we say Sunday or Sunday morning in Christianity. They don't have that.
There's some big, humongous, many hundreds of millions of dollars temple that has just been opened somewhere in India. I may be wrong about this specific, but it just happened last couple months or so. And what's interesting, as you say, that is, it is a kind of place where it's like you can come do things here.
Right.
But
You have to.
It's up to you.
Right.
If you're open, come do your thing. Right. But it's not going to be all of us together doing our thing.
That's right.
That's interesting.
It's very decentralized. This religion allows each individual Hindu to observe the way it best suits them. Sure. They have to agree to some basic things.
Then we'll get into that.
Yeah. And by the way, they call themselves the eternal religion.
Yes.
When we say there's no religious founder
That's good.
or historical origin, they would say, right, because it's always existed.
Yes, it is a part of what is And it's just what it is.
Right. That's what they would say. It's an eternal religion.
One thing I didn't realize until I just read it a little bit ago is that Hinduism is a word created by Westerners to encompass
That's right.
what we're talking about, the dominant religious system, but also all of the social systems.
Yeah.
And they're very intertwined
Right.
in a bunch of ways that are very different than our world here.
Right. Where did the word Hinduism came from? Well, it came from the Western world describing it.
Yeah.
Yep.
So it's the eternal religion for historical traditions.
Right. It is a blending or a melding of 4 historical traditions, Dr. Cooper points out: the Indus, the Vedic, the wisdom, and devotion. So Indus is the oldest. 4,000 years ago, it was the Aryan people and culture in India, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, the Indian subcontinent, and has some of perhaps the oldest religious writings in the world, going back to 3,500, 4,000 years ago. That's how it began. Yeah.
So second is the Vedic, and it is a little more recent, 1500 to 500 BC.
Why is this important?
Well, the caste system begins during this period.
Yes.
And each caste, C-A-S-T-E, and we want the social structures. There are different castes, 5 of them. And each caste has a particular dharma or responsibility
Yes.
that they are to carry out.
Yeah. This is more ingrained in their culture than they would like to admit today, because it's been there for thousands of years.
It's extremely uncool, I'm glad, for the caste system to be admitted to.
That's right.
Yeah, and even the government itself, every once in a while, has some struggle with this because they know it's there.
Yeah. Like, I've talked to some of my friends, my coworkers in India, and they talk about some of the struggles that they see in their culture because of the caste system still existing, at least at a sub-level of what goes on. Even if it's not
formalized. From the government level
right.
technically anymore, sure.
Yeah,
but it is still yet allowed to happen and kept in place, whether they say it or not.
Yeah. So 5 castes. We'll go in a hierarchical one, top down.
Priests
Priests of Brahmins.
Yes.
I-N-S.
B-R-A-H-M-I-N-S.
Right. They study and teach the Vedas, which are the scriptures, and they perform rituals. That's their dharma. That's their responsibility to culture.
And then warriors, their responsibility is to protect and govern. Politicians, princes, military, police. So we got priests, and the dharma for warriors is to protect and govern.
Then merchants, which is what it sounds like, the business class, their job is to teach, have the middle class, produce commerce, etc. That's their job.
And then servants.
What do servants do?
Well, they are those who serve everybody above.
Yeah. Farmers, manual laborers.
Right.
That's their dharma.
And this is
the ones above.
4th caste down.
And there's one
priests,
final
warriors,
caste.
merchants, servants, and then the untouchables. That's the one everybody seems to know about.
Right. Which is fascinating and sad. They literally have no status. Dr. Cooper says they are not able to participate fully in Hinduism.
Right.
Wow. Jesus came for the least of these.
Indeed.
I think
and
about
that is one of the main points of contact we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, there are no untouchables in Christianity.
That's right. So it's the melding 4 traditions, the Indus, Vedic.
Right, that's what we just talked about.
And then the third is wisdom.
Yeah, this wisdom tradition emphasizes philosophy, learning. This is where concepts that you talked about, Scott, reincarnation, karma, non-duality, all is one, is inseparable.
Together, right. Don't separate them. There are no categories about reality. It's all in one.
That's where these key concepts developed. The teaching is summarized in 4 truths called the Great Contemplations or Utterances. We're not going to walk through that. But the essential concept from this wisdom group is you and I are one with creation.
Right.
I and Brahman are one. We'll talk about Brahman in a little bit, M-A-N, but it's you and I are one with creation.
Right. It does get a little confusing for those of us who don't know these terms.
The 4th one, though, Scott, the 4th historical tradition is the most common form today. This is what my friends in India would subscribe to.
Because this is how you work it out for yourself.
Right. So they call this the devotion one.
Yes. And it's how you devote yourself to a particular small g god.
A deity.
Yeah. In a way that integrates into normal life as you experience it, want to experience it.
That's right.
It's a little like you worship this god, small g, but it doesn't necessarily change what you already think and experience about the world.
Right.
It is something you're devoted to. Krishna, even Jesus,
right.
Even Allah, the planet, a particular person. You choose what that is, which means pretty close to functionally, though it's technically, mathematically not this. Every person can have their own small g god.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because there are 330 million or so that are recognized and named under the umbrella of Hinduism.
Yep.
And yet there are a billion of them who would call themselves Hindu and do this devotion thing.
Yeah.
So it can technically be as different as a person wants it to be.
Yeah. Based on what your need is at the moment, which is interesting. I was reading in his book, he talked about, hey, if you're going on a trip, you may want to worship the god of safety and travel. I mean, so it's very pragmatic.
And it can change.
Yes, and it can change. That's right. Even though these gods are real and personal and faithful, they're not impersonal to them, these gods.
Right.
Yeah.
But I'm glad you pointed out, because it isn't just that there's one.
Right.
Your devotion can change in a way that is about the God being a part of your
Yeah.
life functionally.
And did you say this? Each god, whether it's Krishna or whatever, is a representation of the true reality.
Yeah, I sort of alluded to it. Didn't say it clearly, though. Yeah.
Which they call Brahman.
Yeah.
Brahman.
Brahman.
That's the true reality. But that God, they would call themselves monotheistic. That one God is unknowable, unpersonable. You can't fathom him.
Right.
And so they don't spend much time on that. I know it's an odd pantheism, monotheism. It's a strange mix.
Yeah.
But their focus is much more on personal gods in this devotion segment.
All right, so those are the four sort of strains that make it up historically. Though I'm glad we ended on devotion, because that's the most recent one.
Yes.
And that's how I see it emerge today. So religious writings, there are many.
Yeah, Dr. Cooper points out they're enormous. You can even create new scriptures now. They're less authoritative than the old ones, but they're enormous. Yeah.
So there are the Vedas, V-E-D-A-S, which means knowledge.
Yep.
They're the sacred texts.
Yep, and those are broken down into two groups. I'm not sure if this is helpful to you, but there's the Shruti, which is the texts that are heard, and then there's the Smriti, which are the texts that are received. The heard ones, he said, seers, spiritual masters, entered deep states of consciousness and heard the words of the universe.
Yeah.
Wow. So just very quickly, the Vedas are for sacrificial and ritual work, countless hymns to many gods. They're the Brahmanas, instructions for priests, or Brahmanas, I don't know these things. Sutras, I have heard that word. Yep. Instructions for all people, laws of Manu, instructions for all people, and the Upanishads, philosophical meditations. Those all fall under these texts that are heard, the words of the universe.
Right, and not received in the sense that humans didn't come up with it.
Yeah, that's the difference.
It's from the universe.
Right.
There's a new age you can develop in that sense.
Right.
Not that it's the same as this, but oneness with the universe and listening and being aware and letting it tell you.
Right.
Just funny, 'cause it's sort of received. That's what's funny.
I struggle to get the real difference between these. The heard, again, Shruti, the heard sacred texts, are the words of the universe that spiritual masters enter deep states of consciousness who eventually write down. But the received ones, the Smriti, he said were conceived, formulated, and written by humans. Okay, so they don't carry quite the same authority, but they're still the sacred texts.
Yeah, and those are the Mahabharata.
Mahabharata.
It's an epic of war between tribes.
Right.
The Bhagavad Gita.
Heard of that?
Many people have heard that. Yeah. It's a section of the Mahabharata.
Right.
Mahabharata. Okay. Bhagavad Gita is a section of that. The Ramayana,
which is a story about Rama, one of the gods.
Yes, by epic story or epic of war. Yeah. It's a long poem form. It's a poetic form. It's very long. It takes on a mythical kind of quality to it.
Right.
And then Puranas, P-U-R-A.
Yes, not the fish that eat you.
Not Puranas, right? Puranas.
Right.
Stories about various gods and creation myths.
Yeah, and within the Puranas, there are thousands of creation stories. That's what we mentioned when we began. That's where we find those. But these are sacred texts as well. So the four Vedas are the foundational ones.
Right.
By the way, Veda is an ancient form of Sanskrit. And they say it takes a spiritually enlightened teacher to explain those. But you can access the Puranas, which there's the thousands of creation stories.
There's a strain in Hinduism, which is you can't really quite access it unless you've got that spiritual teacher who does.
Right.
That's something we're going to come back to. That's an important distinction.
Right. So those are their texts. Huge sacred writings.
And they continue.
And they can continue
to be written.
Right.
Which kind of makes sense in this me-sourced way of thinking about the world, worship, and reality. Yeah.
Right.
So, what do they believe?
All right. So, what do they believe? That's the next section.
That's a good question, but I think it's not easily answered.
No, it's not. Dr. Cooper points out, Hinduism is very diverse. It's not dogmatic. They have these different scriptures, different gods, different worship practices, different goals, different purposes in life. My goodness, it's hard to nail down. But one key thing is Brahman, which we mentioned, with an N at the end, Brahman.
Yes.
He calls it pure awareness or supreme reality. He says Christians would think of it like an impersonal God. But it is supreme reality. And Hindus told him, I'm going to quote what he heard in a Hindu temple from a group of people, because he tries to get out there and understand what they say. Sure. They said, there is one supreme God. That's that. It seems monotheistic.
Yeah.
But they said that cannot be fully known or understood. The gods, well, now we're pluralistic again. The gods we talk about on earth and give devotion to are simply manifestations of that one supreme God, unquote. That's a helpful quote to understand what they believe. It's interesting.
Yeah, and you'd say there's some parallel between how we talk about God, capital G, as ineffable, and you can't get to the bottom of him, and he's all-powerful, all-knowing, etc. Which means there's a categorical divide between him and us.
Right.
And they have something similar with the supreme God that cannot be fully known, and then small g gods that are manifestations of that one supreme God. Sort of like, this is a John 1 appearance of a Jesus-like small g God. But there are definite distinctions to be made that we will, between that God and these little gods.
Right.
between how they conceive of that and how Christians do.
Right. Like one thing we'll just point out right here. Our God, our one true God, is not impersonal.
Right.
We are commanded and taught to know him. Like that. We'll come back to that. Jesus, that you may know him, we're called to do. And Paul writes in his prayers that I pray the spirit of wisdom and revelation that you may know him. Like that. It's not impersonal for Christians.
And Jesus is both fully God and man.
Right.
That the mediator actually can bridge that divide in a way that is different than this. So the three most powerful gods are Brahma.
Okay. Brahma without the end.
which is different than Brahman.
Right.
Which is the supreme reality about everything.
Right.
There are at least, I think, up to 3 different variations of the same kind of word in a way that means 3 different things that are totally confusing.
Yes, yes. So let me just say it real quick. Brahman with an N is that the supreme reality out there, the unknowable one true God.
Yes.
Brahma, without the end, is a manifestation of him. He is a lesser, he's a god of creation.
Small g God.
And Brahmin, Ayin, are the priests in the upper caste system. So that's the difference.
Those
that
are
if you need to.
Ins?
Ins.
Yes.
Yes. So you've got Brahma without the end, that's the god of creation. And then you have Vishnu, the god of preservation. Remember, you've got creation, preservation, and then it all gets destroyed, right? That's the god of Shiva, the god of destruction. And so this is like a trinity for them in one sense.
Especially since it's sort of cyclical.
Right. God of creation, preservation, and then destruction.
Yeah.
Right. But again, these are not the ultimate God. That's Brahman, the unfathomable supreme reality that holds everything together. Whew. All right. So we're still in beliefs.
Yes, and as we kind of alluded to at the beginning, we Christians think of propositional truths that are beliefs that you can, beliefs that you can easily say, this idea is an idea unto itself.
Right.
This idea is an idea unto itself. It sort of is hard to do that because it morphs together.
Right. He says, Dr. Gruber says, it's less about a set of doctrines and beliefs. As Christians, we would say, here's our doctrines and beliefs.
Right.
Bank on these. He would say, no, it's not about that. It's more about what you do with it.
It's the way.
Yes.
As they call it. It's the way.
Dharma, the responsibility, the way you work it out.
Right.
But there are, he said, at least 9 shared beliefs and attitudes. Let's walk through those. Scott.
Yep. Number 1 says there's one all-pervasive supreme being, capital S, capital B, that we just referred to, Brahman.
Yeah.
Everything is directly or indirectly connected to Brahman.
Right.
Brahman.
They say he's both immanent and transcendent, both creator and unmanifest reality. So it's like everything. Unmanifest reality. It's complex.
I'm not sure what unmanifest reality is.
I'm not even sure myself.
But I understand the idea of something trying to describe
something behind everything. Ineffable, unknowable, unfathomable. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Number 2.
The 4 Vedas, the world's most ancient scriptures for the, quote, eternal religion of Hinduism.
Right.
Number 3, the universe is, we've said this a few times, cyclical.
Yeah.
The universe continues to undergo over and over and over, and it doesn't stop. It just keeps going forever.
Yeah.
Endless cycles of creation and destruction.
We're in a preservation mode at the moment. That's what they would say.
Because we are humans as we think of that.
So they would say we're not a creation, we're not a destruction, we're in the preservation mode, but this preservation mode will end.
Yeah. Which has some consequences to it.
Yes.
Karma.
This is a really important one.
Yes, cause and effect by which people create their own destiny by what they think, say, or do. The way in which the way comes back to make good or bad or create or destroy.
This is really important. For a Hindu, they control their destiny by the law of cause and effect, karma, creating for themselves in their reincarnated next life based on what they do in this life.
So when you say karma's coming back, you're not even talking about somebody who's in the preservation mode.
Yeah.
You're talking about somebody in the preservation mode experiencing something that someone else or that they, in a different form, did. So their experience of it now is the karma coming back, as we talk about it popularly.
Right.
Though it means more than that.
Yeah, this cycle of death and rebirth and karma and reincarnation, ultimately their goal is to escape that finally.
Right.
But we'll get to that. That's hard to do. But karma's all about...
I would say it's literally impossible, but I understand. Yeah.
But that's what the religion is all about. It is creating for yourself your own destiny. You're going to be reincarnated. What you do now changes what you end up with in the next life. And somehow maybe you can escape all this.
Which sounds positive.
Sure. And it's why Hindus, for the most part, are productive members of society accomplishing good things.
They have this motivation.
They better be.
Right. They have this motivation.
That's right.
And it has to be.
Yes. That's where it comes from.
Yeah. The fifth is reincarnation.
Which follows along with
all
that.
souls evolve through many births until all karmas have been resolved or liberated.
Right. All karmas have been resolved or liberated. You got to work through it all.
How long is that supposed to take?
Oh, endless. I mean, eventually there's an end.
I can't imagine it's anything other than
thousands.
It's
yeah.
Number 6 is that divine unseen beings exist.
Right.
And temple worship and rituals create the connection or communion with them.
Right. They think the God's real and personal.
Yep, we've referred to that already. Number 7, we referred to this as well. They all believe in an enlightened master, spiritual knower. They are a guide to know the transcendent absolute.
Right.
Capital T, capital A.
You need an enlightened master to guide you.
Yeah, that's definitely
and along with that,
interesting.
Discipline, conduct, meditation are really important. It's not just having a guide, combining it with your own personal discipline, your conduct, your karma, and the meditation to connect you with the divine, which is what meditation is about.
Right. Yep. Number 8 of the 9, all life is sacred.
I think we know that. We heard about Hindus and Kabbalists, but it's not just that.
Right.
It's all life is
understand
sacred.
that in some basic terms. Right. Everything out there is to be revered and loved and sacred, and so don't hinder anything, anyone.
Right.
Even things that you might question, like a buck.
Yeah, little known fact, ultrasound are banned in India. I know this because I have friends there, because for years it had been used to have boy children instead of girl children, and it's banned because life is sacred. And frankly, I'm glad they banned that so people aren't killing little girls.
Absolutely. Yeah. And because that also means tests that we have, especially in the Western U.S., where we can get in there and see what's wrong so that we don't have to bring the shots term, etc., that kind of stuff. Right. And finally, no one religion teaches the only way to salvation.
Not a surprise.
No.
All genuine paths, they say, are facets of God's light, which is why if you ship Christ with a Hindu, they may seem like they're converting. In reality, you're just adding one more facet of light to what they already knew.
Yeah, I've heard of this a few times. I've never experienced it quite. I had discussions and I talked to Hindus. I've never experienced someone doing that in a discussion, but I've heard about this. It totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm with you. I like that.
I've never had one of my friends
incorporate that.
in that I work with when I shared Jesus ever have anything positive response to that.
Yeah.
Because that's fine. Add him to the pantheon.
Right. So there are 330 million gods. No requirement to believe in any.
Right.
And they're a representation of true God, the Brahman, whom cannot actually fathom.
You may have heard of Shiva, Vishnu, Brahma, and Lakshmi. Those are some more common gods.
Mm-hmm.
Right. But they're not worshiping for God, they would say. Why?
Right, because it all leads to one true and knowable
Brahman with that.
Brahman, yes. It's a being.
So there's some of their beliefs.
So worship practices
Next section of the book.
Are as you want them to be.
Right.
There's not a prescribed time, place, or even, in a sense, way of doing it.
Right. Call your worship or reverend puja.
And instead of having to go to someplace corporately, I do it here in my home. I have a shrine, or I do something here.
Right.
Yeah. People maybe have seen pictures of shrines as if I remember thinking, oh, so that's how the worship happens, and then realizing, oh, that's their home.
Right. That's their home.
That's a bigger room than I thought it
Yeah.
would be.
Yeah.
Not that everybody's shrine is large, but it's interesting how you do things differently there.
They have household gods, like you said. They would feed, clothe, they give worship to them on a daily basis.
How do you feed?
I'm not quite sure.
They have 3 main worship paths, or yogas.
Yeah,
which is
yoga.
word for yoke, or the way, or union to God.
Be aware that's what yoga means. It means a yoke or a union to the ultimate Brahman.
There's karma yoga, the path of action. It's about works and sacrificing yourself for others. The bhakti yoga, path of devotion.
That's the most common one.
It's about showing love and devotion to a God of your choosing. And then there's the jnana yoga, path of knowledge, Jnana. Yeah, that's the path of knowledge. It's philosophical, and it's for the very spiritual.
Yeah, there's a few people that do this.
Yeah.
So those are
because they're the only ones that pronounce it.
Yeah. So those 3 main worship paths are very important to them. Like, they work out their karma following those 3 paths. The most common one being path of devotion, which you talked about. The path of action is that sacrifice. He pointed out a mom who stays home to love her husband and her children may be following this path of action while she's sacrificing herself for the good of others. Remember, you're creating your own destiny by what you do.
All right, so let's talk about hatha yoga.
Yeah, so
T-H-A.
So I thought it might be helpful to talk about yoga because here in the U.S. you're familiar with the term yoga.
Yeah, we use that. We just talk about yoga.
Right. We use the term very generically.
Yes.
We're not talking about karma yoga, bhakti yoga, or jnana yoga. Those are the 3 ones Hindus follow because it's how they work out their destiny. Hatha yoga, which means force, is more about posture and breathing techniques. It's not one of the main ones a Hindu would follow to work out their destiny. But it is one in the West we've adopted.
Right, as if somehow it's something that has very, very Indian Hindu roots to it, and it doesn't really.
Right. So it's mainly posture and breathing techniques. There is meditation if you do it according to how hatha yoga should be done. Scott, what do we want to say about our views of this as it's being popularized here in the U.S. and even among Christians?
Well, we need to be careful about how we use the word yoga.
Yes.
And what we mean by it and what we don't mean.
Right.
And I think that's, in a sense, that's the main distinction.
It is.
So from the book, it says, yoga cannot be neatly... Oh, no, this is from... Is this from...
This is from Al
Albert
Mohler's article,
Right.
Should Christians Practice Yoga?
No, this is from Al Mohler.
Right.
He says, yoga cannot be neatly separated into physical and spiritual dimensions. The physical is the spiritual in yoga.
That's what I'm saying.
And the exercises and disciplines of yoga are meant to connect with the divine.
Connect with the divine is the point. Yeah. He says yoga is a spiritual discipline by which the adherent is trained to use the body as a vehicle for achieving consciousness of the divine. Well, Christians do it differently. He says Christians are called to look to Christ for all that we need and to obey Christ through obeying his word, not to escape the consciousness of this world by achieving an elevated state of consciousness, but to follow Christ in the way of faithfulness. We're not called to empty the mind or see the human body as a means of connecting to the divine. Believers are called to meditate on the word of God.
Yeah, the emptying or not issue is one of the main things here.
I would agree. That's the thing.
To meditate for a believer is to think about, focus on the special revelation of God through the word.
It's right.
That is to meditate.
Yeah.
And it's not this, let's just do away with all of the body and mind so that you can take to that consciousness. That's entirely different.
Yeah.
That's what's being talked about here as yoga, that is the meditation.
Right. I was thinking Psalm 1:2. His delight is in the law of the Lord, and on his law he meditates day and night. You want to be a Christian? Meditation is great, but it has a locus, and it is the law of God, the revealed special knowledge of God by which he communicates his truths of his character and nature to us. That's what we meditate on.
Yeah.
That's the key here.
And he ends this by saying some Christians insist that their practice of yoga, as we talk about it here in the West, that it involves no meditation, no spiritual direction, no inward concentration, and no thought element, which is exactly what we've just said is the problem. He says, well, if you are not meditating, there's no spiritual direction, there's no inward concentration or thought. If you are doing that, you are not practicing yoga. Right. If there's no meditation or direction of consciousness, you are not practicing yoga. You are simply performing a physical exercise. Don't call it yoga.
Yeah, I like that comment, which is, okay, so Scott and I are saying this, that hatha yoga in its intended, and it's a bit of a catch-all phrase, but in its intention, it is to connect to the divine.
Yes.
And it includes meditation that allows you to connect to the divine in a way that Christians do not, and we're specifically told to do otherwise. So be very careful about that. You are not emptying your mind in a way to connect with the divine. You are to fill your mind with the word of God. So if you're just emptying your mind, then you are in danger of connecting to the divine in an occultish way.
Right. And I was thinking, okay, so if somebody out there is in a yoga class,
right,
at whatever place they're doing their exercise, or they're listening to something, what they need to be conscious of, at the least, and there may be other benefits to this, but I would just say at the least, if they're hearing someone say, free, empty, that is the trigger to go, Christ says this is the word, this is the moment at which I do the opposite of that. So that really I'm just exercising, and that is helping me, sure. But that instead of emptying, I'm filling with Christ, with his word, with the truth of the scriptures.
Yeah. So don't be fooled by that. Be aware of the dangers. If you're just exercising, then just call it exercise. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So we've talked a little bit there, a point of contact between Hinduism and Christianity. Right. There are others which will evolve us here. Yeah. Talking about what Hindus believe in some summary ways.
Right. This is how he ends every chapter with what he calls point of contact. And I think he just means by that a jumping off point for conversation with Hindus.
Right.
So what can we do? What do Hindus believe and what can we say?
Well, they think of soul as a journey that goes on for millennia.
Yeah.
And reincarnation many, many times over.
Right. We would say, well, no, Christians have a soul, yes, but life is not an endless cycle of death and rebirth.
Yes.
Hebrews 9:27.
Just as a man is appointed to die once, after that judgment.
Right.
Die once.
Right.
Yeah.
All right.
So Hindus are not concerned about salvation from sin, but liberation from the cycle of death and rebirth.
Right. This is which they're trapped in.
Like very interesting.
On and on and on. And a Christian would say, I don't fear what happened after death because of Christ's death and resurrection. He destroyed the works of the devil. Hebrews 2:14 and 15 is a great passage.
Yes. Since therefore the children share in flesh and blood, he himself likewise partook of the same things, that through death he might destroy the one who has the power of death, that is the devil, and deliver all those who through fear of death were subject to lifelong slavery.
Yeah, a Christian looks forward in one sense to death because it is a breaking of the slavery that everyone else senses. But for us, it is our final connection in our eternal state with our Lord and Savior. Yeah. Jesus called it paradise when he was on the cross. So how do Hindus get liberation from the cycle of death and rebirth? Is that third point there?
I'm hoping you're pointing to the next one. This happens by following one of the three major paths, or yogas, that we mentioned above, to ensure a better rebirth.
Remember, that's what they're doing. They are following a yoga path, a union, a yoke, so that they produce their own karma.
Right. They're yoking to themselves, the
divine
being, Brahman.
To have a better rebirth.
Right.
Yeah. And Christians say, no, I will be forever united to God after death because of Christ's work for me.
Yeah. Philippians 1:21-3 say, they say, for me to live is Christ, to die is gain. If I'm to live in the flesh, that means fruitful labor for me yet, which shall I choose? I cannot tell. I'm hard pressed between the two. My desire is to depart and be with Christ, for that is far better.
Yeah, Paul says, when I die, I'm with Christ. Yeah. Whereas a Hindu hopes, this is that fourth bullet we have there, a Hindu hopes to finally escape the cycle of death and rebirth by being forever united to Brahman. But as you pointed out, Scott, this is very difficult to attain.
I would say it's impossible given some philosophical commitments they have.
But we believe differently.
Well, yeah, for sure. We don't have to escape the cycle by ourselves. And we are not forever united to ourselves as a way of uniting to Brahman, which cannot happen and won't ever happen. We are united to Christ.
Yeah.
And we escape because he has escaped us.
Yeah. Just thinking of Revelation 22, they will see his face and his name will be on their foreheads.
As an identity,
like that's
they
who
now
we
have
are.
from.
Yeah. That a Christian lives with that hope.
That the work is done.
The work is done
by someone else's superior external force.
And I will see
God.
the face of God. Yeah.
I have to be careful with the word force because that's not exactly the way Christians talk about it. Although energy is talked about in some ways in the Greek. So, couple more. Hindus cannot know Brahman, Brahman. They cannot know the pure awareness or supreme reality.
Because
it's impersonal.
Right. And we mentioned this before, but Christians say the opposite. We can know God. And Jesus himself told us this.
I'm the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. It's John 14:6. And I was also thinking earlier, Jesus is the fullness of grace and truth for us because, or to us and for us, because he is both God and man. Fully, truly, both of those at the same time, which is the necessary and only way that it can happen. So why we say Jesus is exclusively the way, because there's a God-man.
Right.
There isn't a God-man in Hinduism.
No, and I said this earlier, but Jesus pointed out that we can't know God. He's not impersonal. John 17:3. This is eternal life, Jesus said, that they know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent. So, that's a jumping off point, is that breaking the cycle of death and rebirth. Someone has for you, giving you hope over death, created for you an eternal destiny where you can know God. And it's not up to you to create this by your karma of how you live, where you're constantly striving and trying and being reborn. To me, it seems exhausting and helpless.
We didn't use this term to talk about this way, but often people talk about how it is a fatalism. That's what it is and how it functions. Yeah.
So wrap it up.
Summary. Hinduism is a vibrant, diverse, and deeply spiritual religion, which continues to attract many in the West who are spiritually bankrupt and who are tired of imperialism and consumerism.
And that's why it's attracting people.
Yeah, it does have legs in Western culture because it seems to offer a rootedness beyond this.
Yeah. People see through the shallowness eventually of our consumerism, materialism.
Right.
So Christians can engage Hindus by, first of all, living deep lives of spiritual commitment to Christ. Like, show as a Christian that you live for something beyond consumerism and materialism.
Beyond the material luxuries of the world.
Because if you live for the luxuries of this world, Hindus will dismiss that because they don't do that.
Yeah, they're not all that interested in that, as it turns out.
Right. Rise above selfish consumerism. Live with, and here's the key, live with hope and joy for life after death, because we're not caught in an endless cycle of death and rebirth and karma where everything depends on me. And it just goes on and on and on, hoping to connect to an impersonal, fathomless Brahman. No, you have someone who on your behalf has achieved what you cannot, so that you have hope beyond the grave, to be known and to know the true personal God of the universe, who is embodied in Christ for you. There's hope. There's hope.
It's a good summary way to end, lest we go on and on and on.
Well, hopefully that's helpful.
Thank you.